we do a lot of stonework here at Ravenfell Manor, of course using Drylok, which is like the miracle substance for turning foam into stone. But once you get it covered, it looks brand new like this. I'm going to show you how we take this and turn it into this. The aging process is actually pretty simple. First thing you need to know is make sure you get every inch of the foam at least covered with 2 layers of the Drylok, because you're going to be using spray paint and the foam does not react kindly to spray paint. Give it some kind of a brace, because the force of the water that you're going to be using will knock it over. My tombstones have PVC, so that allows me to, 1, protect them from the wind, but 2, age them without having to worry about knocking them over. As you can see, I've got lots of the new gray objects that need to be aged. You're going to want an assortment of spray paint colors. Looking for the earth tones. The more you have, the more diversity in color, the richer, fuller patina you're going to get on your stone. And of course, when it comes down to it, you want a base black latex paint to begin. So first things first, get a chip brush and a dish or anything you want. I use a lot of water in between for making the black paint runny at times for different things to lighten them up. You're going to want to have a hose. Preferably with an adjustable spray head. It's good not to have the water running all the time, and also to have a different force of water to use when you're wetting your stone. I'll show you how you use that in a little bit. But first things first, we are going to do a detail paint with the regular black latex and a chip brush, kind of dry brush it and fill in any place we want darker, because we want to get that established first before we start adding the patina. So, you've got your black paint, got your chip brush, got your water source, dish. Fill up just a little bit of water in your dish. Don't need much, just a dribble, just something to wet your brush in between. Now, take your stone, you decide where you want everything darker. Very lightly, dab in the paint. If you've ever dry brushed before, make sure you brush off as much of the paint as possible, just where it leaves a tad. Just brush loosely. Just barely touching. Basically what this does is it just leaves a little bit of paint on the outer edges. If you need a little bit darker, I'll use the grass. I didn't bring cardboard. Also, if you make any mistakes, another reason the hose is here. Lighten it up a little bit. As you slowly work through, you'll slowly begin to darken up all the edges. Bring all the detail out by dry brushing. And that's my dog. You will likely hear him barking at something in almost any video I ever do, because that is simply the way he is. Went and got cardboard because it's a lot easier to get your brush set for dry brushing with this. You basically brush it on the cardboard a little bit until it just gives just a barely a little bit of black paint. That way you know that it's ready to just hit the edges and not actually be painting it. And you begin to darken. Where it's wetter, it will come out a little bit looser. Not quite as dark and defined. Constantly get people driving by throughout this time of year, checking it out, checking the signs. Decide the features that you want to really stand out. If you want the cracks to stand out, add more of those. I'm trying to get the framework in. And as you do it, it just lightly darkens the edges, the outermost pieces. It also catches, which is one of the wonderful things about Drylok. Drylok has a great texture that picks up so much in dry brushing that you get that speckled stone look without even putting much effort into it. As you see, it starts to come out and starts to appear a little bit more deep, a little bit more clear. I've been playing around with the cracks and trying to figure out which way I like them more. If I like the cracks looking more black, or if I like the cracks looking like they have a little bit more black edging and a little bit more fresh, untouched interior. I'm sort of liking the interior better. So I just define the edges. On the places where it's wet, you will get kind of this ashy silhouette without it really catching, whereas on the places where it's dry, you'll get more of the bumpy, textured blackening. I like to do these a little bit darker. Always want your lettering a little bit darker. It's got to stand up to everything else. But it's always nice to afterwards go through and add a little bit of water and create it running, so it looks like as the water has built up over the years in the different cracks and crevices, that it has started to erode away and some of it is starting to drain out. Now I am going to go and continue to get this done, and then I'll give you an update of what it looks like after I've gone through, and we will come back to this later, to the next step. When you get down to the little cracks, you want to lightly brush, just barely tap. Got a little bit of water, so I'm starting to get the more ashen, consistent covering. I will say, there is no surefire way to do this. I have found many things that I enjoy, that I like, through sheer accident and messing up. And if you do mess it up, you can always just Drylok the spots that you messed up, or put over more colors, which actually sometimes makes it looks better and makes the mistake look better than what it would have if you had done it right. Slowly darkening up more of the pieces. You can see all of the cracks and all of the detail is starting to stand out a lot more as I'm going over. It's really kind of a what you want. I started one that I have really, really dark cracks. Now I kind of like the lighter cracks. Sometimes I use the water to give it that kind of clouded, continued muddied look. Creates a nice darker gray. here's kind of the effect that you'll get. Just a little bit of paint, a little bit of water, splashed around until it gets nice and watery, and then just kind of lightly brush. And it'll sometimes come up darker, but the nice part about it being wet, you can slowly spread it and thin it out and lighten it up until you get the right tone that you want. So you went from that natural gray to more of a worn, darker gray. So I've done a pretty thorough watered down black paint wash across the majority, just to age the stone, get it darkened up. Kind of give it some contrast. And this is just kind of a base to begin building the patina. Next, I will be going through and darkening up some edges with just the straight black paint without wetting down the brush. Okay, first you want to get the black paint. See? Then you brush until just lightly. You don't want too much coming off the brush. Now, this is why I like this one, because it just darkens up those sharper edges. Brings more of the detail out of the work you put in, damaging the stone and making it look old and broken. So while you get the blurred out patina with the watered down, this gives you more of your sharper contrast and detail work. This is where you want to do like around the skull, darkening the eyes a little bit, making the teeth pop up a little bit more. And as you see with the Drylok, it really catches the paint well. Darken up that crack. A little bit more paint. Lighten it up. You're just lightly brushing. You don't want it to touch completely. You just want it to kind of skim across. And that allows the paint to catch on all of the raised edges, giving you that contrast and depth to all of your pieces. Okay, so with this stone we finished. We did the wet paint wash and then went over and dry brushed all the cracks and crevices and details to bring out the black. So you're starting to get there. This is basically just to bring everything out and make it pop, make everything stand out with what we're going to do next. Remember, do the dry brushing on the cracks to really bring out the definition all along the edge. If you get any inconsistencies, anything that you don't like, one, you can Drylok over it if you like. But I found that any mistakes I usually make can usually be fixed in the next part, because the next part is more random and erratic, and you kind of want that anyway, because the build-up over years is random. It's not going to be straight lines and detail. Now, one of the nice things about doing this is you can add a lot of different colors. Try to stick with earth tones, but a patina is from multiple sources, multiple colors, and it's built up over years. So you want as much of diversity in that as possible. The thicker, more diverse patina you create, the more realistic the stones are going to look. Here I've got the tan, the green, and the black. You're going to start with black. Black is basically to fill in, give it that kind of runny look. Basically, the look of dirt slowly running down the tombstone over time. Key point, every spray paint works different. So you probably want to test it on a different piece, maybe Drylok a separate piece of foam and see how it does. Some stick really well, some don't. So you have to play with it until you figure out what you want. It's the ones that stick better than you would expect that the ones you got to worry about, because then you have to go through and try to cover that up. But first we're going to start with block. First things first, you want to wet down the stone. You don't want your paint sticking really well to the stone. You want it kind of running down and only sticking in a few places where it gets a chance. Oh, if I didn't mention it earlier, a rag is a good thing too to dry your brush in between the dry locking, or to dry certain places where the water builds up a little bit too much. Now, keep your hose handy. I wish I had a more smaller gun-like attachment instead of this giant wand, but it works. So, here's what you're gonna do. Start to darken where you want it. Don't let it stay on too long though. As you'll see, as you put it on, it starts to run a little bit. And that's what you want. You want it running down into the crevices, running down to the cracks. The longer you leave it, depending on the paint, this one, the longer you leave it, the better it'll stick. If you notice, where it starts to break away, you get this runny kind of trailing of the paint. You also get it to start looking more blotchy, which is another factor you want, because the patinas don't develop uniformly across the entire stone. So, continue to keep it wet. Also, this is exactly why when you're dry locking, you want to make sure you have everything covered with Drylok, because spray paint will eat your foam. Make sure you get any places. You can leave certain places left without the patina. I like to get it a little bit everywhere. I like to get it more heavily in certain places. The more water you add, the more it'll come off, the quicker. I'm trying to get it more black. This is a really old tombstone. I want it really looking like it's falling apart. Now, the one place you will have a problem is along the base. The water tends to build up in the cracks, so the paint won't stick as well. So you're going to have to dry that a little bit, wait until some of the water stops, and then go through usually along the edges and do that. Thing is, I don't do as much black down along the edges. Okay, so that's the front part. The edges are pretty much the same. Just go through. Give it kind of a consistent coloring. Spray it. Also, if you're wanting to create more of the runny dynamic, what you'll do is you would spray it down here. Wet it down here, so that you end up getting the run down through the paint, carrying it off. Anything you don't like, splash a little bit harder, and you end up with a running pattern. I'm going to continue with this and then get back with doing the other colors. So, here it is after washing it with the black spray paint. It's a lot darker, still wet, but it's got more of the running, like the dirt has built up as the rains come down it over the years. Now's the fun part. I wish this camera would pick up more of this detail, but now is the fun part, because now you get to add the different colors. So, one of my favorites is this mossy green. Yes, I'm doing this by myself, so the camera's going to be a pain in the butt. Okay. Now, I definitely start with mossy green down at the base. And I don't actually wet as much as I do with this, because this, if you just do a light brushing, it kind of just fills in. And don't do it everywhere. Just, where do you think, see, in there, if you do it a little bit too light, dark, you drop it off. Where do you think the moss would go? That's a little bit dark. Let it sit for a few minutes. Well, not minutes, a couple seconds. And see, you begin to develop a more in-depth patina. It looks like moss has grown on it over the years. Especially the base. I always like the bases looking nice and green because it really tends to blend them into the grass and make it look a little bit more like it's part of the environment where it is. So it's not as stark of a contrast between the stone and the grass. Green. It's really nice on the sides, especially if you've broken it up a lot like this. See, you've even got it running down the sides here and there. Now, the base, I usually don't even wet it that much. It just kind of zip tie. The water, as I'm doing the upper parts, tends to take care of that for me. And see, now I could leave it like that. I want a little bit more. And I have. The nice thing, it'll also start to catch on some of the rough areas that the black paint has created. So you'll end up toning down some of your black. Leave it a little bit darker in some areas. And we continue all the way around. Now, all of the stonework and all of the cracks and everything that you went through so much trouble dremeling out begins to take on a little bit more depth. Becomes a little bit more realistic. I like to build up quite a bit of different layers, different areas. Right now, I'm probably not going to water this one at all, because I want that rich green. I want it to look like this one has been developing over years, centuries. Okay, now give me a second, I'll bring back the next coat. If I had the money, I would have a whole layer of colors. Tan, trying to get some brown contrast in here. I always go over it with the green afterwards, just because that's the one that I want to pop the most, but I like to stack it to where I get the tan built. Tan is a really nice one for covering up flaws, because you can add it. It's not as stark, and then you can add other colors onto it, and it basically just looks like it's been built up with dirt. This one, as I said, every paint's different. This one not only sticks quick, but it doesn't come off as well with the water normally. But you're still getting this nice patina. Okay, so now that we've got the tan added in, I'm going to go back and add the green again. Because as I said, well, and beyond it, the moss is always seeking the sun. So the moss is always going to grow on top of the other stuff. So as much as you build up the patina of the darks and the browns, you kind of want the green to be built up on top. Make sure you get down along the edges. That water likes to wash it away when you're doing upper parts. And the back again. And there we go. So now we have a stone that looks heavily aged. The cracks are pretty apparent because of the dry brushing that you did earlier. Letters are done. And you've gone from a plain, bland, gray stone to one that you could actually imagine you stumbled across in the middle of a cemetery where it's been sitting for several decades, just aging and wearing down and falling apart. So, that's how I do it. I'm sure other people do it the same. I'm sure other people do it different. But that is how the stonework at Ravenfell Manor comes to life each year.